This week on Women Who Rise, I'm joined by coach, speaker, and podcast host, Alma Merrill. And this conversation is all about what it really takes to succeed when nothing is handed to you. We talk about fear, discipline, and why so many people stay stuck waiting for the right moment instead of building the skills that create opportunity. Alma shares the mindset shifts that separate people who rise and why consistency matters more than motivation every single time. If you've ever felt like you know you're capable of more, but you're not sure what's holding you back, this episode is gonna be for you. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Women Who Rise. I'm your host, Heather Mansy. Today, I'm joined by Alma Merrill, a real estate coach, speaker, and podcast host known for his powerful teachings on discipline, mindset, and creating success through consistent action. Alma has trained agents and business professionals across the country, helping them master the skills of communication, prospecting, and personal accountability so they can build businesses that don't depend on luck or market conditions. Through his coaching, speaking engagements, and podcasts, he challenges people to take full ownership of their results and to grow by developing the habits, routines, and mental toughness that long-term success requires. I'm excited to have him here today to talk about what it really takes to rise in business, in leadership, and in life. Alma, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate that introduction. Nice to see you on here. I know we tried to get on here a while ago, and we missed each other, and I'm just grateful to be back on. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you for saying it. So let's just jump right in. When you look back at the very beginning of your working life, what early experiences first taught you that success isn't something that you wait for, but something that you create through your own actions and discipline?
Yeah, when I first started in real estate, I kind of didn't know what I was doing. I had no clue what I was doing. As a matter of fact, my real estate school was the very first classroom experience that I had ever had. I grew up in a pretty interesting environment. I had, my parents didn't believe in school. They didn't believe in public school. And so there were 8 kids in my family, and none of us actually understood. Some of us couldn't read. I couldn't read. I couldn't spell growing up. So I didn't learn how to read until I was 12 years old. I remember reading my first word, and it was an Ajax cleanser bottle on the shelf, of the kitchen counter. And I remember it in the windowsill, and I remember looking up at that and just identifying those words, those letters, and turning it into a word for the first time. And that was a defining moment for me. I realized that nobody was going to do this for me, and it was something I really had to do on my own. The other thing is, and then when I learned how to spell at about age 21, again, another defining moment, because classroom, having a classroom wasn't, it wasn't in my options. My parents were somewhat fundamentalist religious, and they kept us kind of as shut-ins. It's an interesting part of my story, but we couldn't go outside till the other kids in the neighborhood were walking home from school, so that it looked like we were at school. And so that, it was kind of a tactic to avoid the authorities, the truancy officer or whatever.
Illegal.
Yeah. And it was an interesting lifestyle growing up. My dad worked every day, all day long. He was a very loving, very caring man. My mom somewhat ruled the nest, but unfortunately she was drugged up all day. She was an addict, and she got addicted to opioids. And so we kind of raised ourselves during the day, and we had to figure stuff out on our own. She was asleep all day in some comatose state, and we as kids, we were just left to our own devices, and we figured our own stuff out. So coming into real estate was when I first stepped into real estate. What happened was I was a truck driver at the time, hauling lumber for a lumber yard. That's the only thing you can do without a high school diploma, And so
Yeah.
they were,
Yeah.
So they gave me this job, and then I got this girlfriend who was a broker's assistant, and I was really close with her, and we ended up getting married. And but before that, she was like, "Hey, I think you would be really good in sales," and I was like, I don't really have sales background. I'm not good at sales. I did a door-to-door sales job one time, and it was terrible. And I couldn't do it. I was literally the worst in my door-to-door sales team. I couldn't close any deals. I couldn't get anybody to say yes. And she's like, yeah, but you know how to talk to people, and that's what's important. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess, I do know how to talk to people. I guess that is important. So let's, what does it look like? How does it work? And she's like, well, here's, you got to go through. At this time, it was 90 hours of school, in
Yeah.
Utah at this time. It was when I was living in Utah. And I'm like, yeah, I'll try it. What do I have to lose? And so I did. I tried it. I went to real estate school. I actually really enjoyed it, but I was scared out of my mind when I walked in the door. I was absolutely scared out of my mind because my whole life I had been told that these learning organizations and that were my parents would tell us that the schools were like prisons. And growing up in California, they'd point out the schools and they'd be like, yeah, look at the school. See how it's got bars on the windows? That's to keep the kids in. And you don't want to go to school. They're bad. They're evil. And they teach bad principles, and they, bad doctrines, and they teach against God and all this stuff. And so this was my mindset built around this concept. And so I was afraid of it. I was afraid of learning. I was afraid of and so, when I went into real estate school, I was just amazed at how much I enjoyed it, amazed at how the camaraderie of the people around me, and amazed at how cool the teacher was, and how accepting everybody was. And I just felt good. And so in that environment, I was able to have this positive classroom experience. And I went and took my real estate test, and I passed the first time. And it blew my mind. I was like, wow, my very first test in life. And it's supposed to be a difficult test. And I passed. And I'm like, man, what else can I do? I taught myself how to read. I taught myself how to spell. I just finally, got my first professional license. What else can I do? And I was kind of naive to the idea that I couldn't do something,
Yeah.
And one of the benefits of being kind of neglected as a child was there's nobody there to tell you what you couldn't do.
Yes.
And so we just kind of did what we did, and we just kind of learned along the way. And, long story short, now I've been a millionaire multiple times over through the real estate business, and I've, helped many people get to those places in their life. And, one of my gifts, one of my goals is to share and to contribute to those that are right at the bottom, right at starting out or restarting, right?
Yes.
Because we go through different parts of our life where we restart. So that's I hope that answers your question. It's kind of the long way around.
It really does. Yeah. It really does. And boy, I love, so much of what you were able to just teach our audience about you right now, because look, everybody's running around with this imposter syndrome idea, this like, I can't do it. I'm not good enough. Well,
yes.
Yeah, it's just that you haven't done it yet. And
right.
Here you are coming from arguably a much more, from a place of knowledge and learning, a much more disadvantaged position in your early 20s or whatever, when you first came into schooling and real estate and all of that. People can say, oh, I wasn't that great in school or this and that, but you didn't have school at all. You simply did not benefit from any sort of organized educational environment at all. And in fact, did not even get to the point of literacy and, like you say, the ability to write until, a combination of 12 and 20 or so years old. And this is, I absolutely love the win, and the point that, look, you didn't have anyone to tell you. First of all, you didn't have anyone to teach you things, but you also didn't have anyone to stop you and tell you that you were incapable. You must have, and who were you, by the way, to say, wow, okay, I passed this test. I can climb mountains. Like what else can I do? And it was amazing because what incredible social proof for you that, number one, schools are not prisons, that actually learning can be fun, and engaging, and socializing with others can be fun and engaging. And that, by the way, you can win. And it is amazing. And it says something about you as well that you did pass the first time. There's a lot of brilliant people out there who, passed on the fifth, sixth, eighth time. Doesn't matter.
Or
No
18th
judgment
time.
here. But it
I
is
I had
right.
one friend.
Yes.
One friend, it took her till the 18th try, but she still did it.
Okay.
She went and
I
she
love
did
that.
it.
Yeah, I love that. It's like I tell all my agents, hey, the minute you pass, you will have the license. Like it simply is a given fact. As long as you don't give up, it will occur. But the fact that you did, and that you were able to have this really strong win coming out of so much deficiency and difficulty, and sort of absentee parents on both sides, where one is working so much and the other one is not able to be cognitively there. This is incredible. And the fact that all of this has made you decide to become someone who helps the least among us, who are looking to get into real estate, who are looking to find their way, their path to wealth, or their path at least to the middle class. I think that's incredible. And it's something we share in common because, mentorship, I grew up without a lot of things, not at all in your position, but I grew up wanting, for food and other things. And so the idea that you and I can now be teachers, and we can help others is extraordinary. I think it was Leo Pareja. On a recent podcast that said, there's this statistic we don't realize, which is something like a great percentage of world leaders in the US had one or both parents die before the age of 15.
Oh.
And the other statistic that, that is in common is that there's a whole lot of them in prison. So it's like world leader or prison, it's a fascinating statistic, but it's like, and that's what I take my hat off to you, because you chose leadership and you chose winning rather than, the opposite, which is, okay, life sucks, I'm just going to keep going like that. So I have another question for you. I'm excited to hear your answer on this, which is, was there a moment in your journey where you realized that mastering your mindset and your skills would matter more than, say, market conditions, talent, or opportunity? I know you've been a millionaire multiple times over. And then how did that realization change the direction of your life or your business, which informed those actions?
Yeah. So mindset skills, I always preach mindset, skill sets, and discipline, and I always ask people, what's the most important tool in your toolbox? What is it? And everybody's like, oh, mindset. Yeah, you have to have mindset. You definitely have to develop skills, but consistency is actually your greatest tool. And the reason I say that is, and people will argue with me on this, even leaders and stuff like that will argue with me about that consistency is your greatest tool. They say mindset is, but I would say consistency is, because what happens is when you're very consistent, then you start to develop a very empowered mindset, because you start to see results from your consistency. Because if you go into it and you don't have mindset and you're broken and you hurt and your heart hurts, the only thing that will carry you through is consistency. And I get a little choked up on that because I've seen people in scenarios that are just diabolically impossible. You look at it from their perspective and you go, how are you going to do this? I think about my friend John, who has cerebral palsy, and it was his consistency that made him successful. This guy went from this belief system, this mindset of, I can't do this. He was told his whole life, he can't do this, and I won't accomplish this. because of his cerebral palsy. And he just consistent effort pushed him over the edge, and he became, ridiculously wealthy in real estate, And that's another cool thing about real estate is just the ability to achieve something incredible without, without a specific, education or degree or something. It literally just opens the doors to all possibility. And so, above all, consistency is your greatest tool. And as long as you're consistent, the rest of that, the mindset, because what happens is when you're really consistent, you start to see these wins pile up, and then you have wins, and then you have confidence because of the wins, and then the confidence adds a higher level of mindset, and then your disciplines fall into play, and then all of a sudden you're making money and you're changing lives and you're sharing with other people, and it's really a beautiful thing.
That's incredible. And honestly, I mean, just the story you shared about John, when you mentioned his condition, yeah, I started to choke up as well because we just don't realize what other people are going through. And sometimes you do, and sometimes it's a physical thing, and sometimes it's a, very, very debilitating emotional or mental issue. Sometimes it's, substance abuse. It's in our midst all the time. People are struggling with all kinds of things. But the fact that in so many other occupations, that would have been a hard no. There's just how can he do what he needs to do? And the fact that, like you said, look, real estate has a pretty low barrier to entry. If you can show up for those classes online or otherwise and pass that test, you can get in. And look, it's part of why I think people have this idea that we're not that great. We're just maybe equivalent to used car salespeople or whatever. But the thing is, to be a good realtor, to be able to have staying power, and then to be able to use that vehicle to build wealth, and through that then build your dreams and help perhaps others, that takes grit, determination, and, like you say, this consistency. Because if you can just choose a path and start going one step at a time, you can get somewhere. But I absolutely love the total wisdom and brilliance of what you just said, because it is, in fact, that consistency that on the day you wake up and your mindset is completely sideways, if you can just do the next right decision, make the next right move, stick to the plan, because how many days are we going to wake up and not feel confident, not
Yes.
feel like, we'll be stuck in our head. It's maybe, we're stuck on the freeway still. We're thinking about the guy who honked at us. It's like our brains are all over the place. But if you can just be consistent, stick to the plan, do the thing you said, then show up for yourself in that way, the good feelings will come. And I know Mel Robbins talked about this recently.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I love Mel. But to your point
Yeah.
of you waking up in the morning and your perspective, you can't create or you can't decide what your very first thought is when you wake up in the morning. It's impossible, right? Your mind is on autopilot, and so you can't decide that first thought. But guess what? You can decide the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. You can change your trajectory based on your thoughts, and your thoughts lead to your emotions, right? And then your emotions lead to your actions, and then your actions lead to your results. And so it's all based on that first thought. But yeah, consistency, it's a critical tool. It's your greatest tool. And if you can master your consistency and not lie to yourself, you can tell yourself, I'm going to do something, and then actually do it. That is the greatest gift you'll ever give yourself, is being truthful to yourself and following through with yourself. So what were you going to say about Mel Robbins?
I love it. Well, and she said, I love that, by the way. And I just wrote that down because I think that that's, again, it's like you just dropped another, wisdom bomb on us, which is, because that's how we build integrity. I will get up and do this, and then do it. It builds this inner strength and belief in you. And we can get through a lot of things in life without being able to necessarily believe in others or believe in an outcome. But being able to believe in ourselves is like an internal superpower. And we can lose that belief very easily through that constant, like, I am going to do this, but I don't, or I'm not going to do this action, but I do. And it's what creates that cognitive dissonance that really robs us of that feeling or that energy that could allow us to feel good about ourselves. One of the things that Mel said, and I was just going to briefly share, was she said, look, and my team talked about it this morning during our motivational moment this morning, and it was, if you're waiting to feel ready to get up and get outside and exercise or whatever that is, it's like you absolutely said, Alma, you cannot control your thoughts to a greater degree, and certainly your emotions even less so. They're transient, they pop up all the time. As she said, if you're waiting to get to the emotion that allows you to want to feel like getting out and exercising in, the cold,
Yes.
rainy, like I live in the Pacific Northwest, it looks terrible outside. She says, never going to happen. What you have
It's
to
83
realize
degrees here and
is,
sunny. I'm sorry.
just make me jealous. Make me jealous. But yeah, she just said, look, if you can just get out, get one foot in front of the other, just start. Put on the tennis shoes and start, and be aware that your mind might be screaming for you to, climb under a blanket. But it's the getting out and it's the starting of that activity that you'll then get awarded with whatever emotions could come up as a result of that activity. A feeling of joy, a feeling of, fresh air outside, a feeling of a serenity, a feeling of just your blood moving through your body. Like, it's like, you're not, that is the reward, but you're not going to get it before. If you always think you're going to get it before, you're never going to get up and do the thing, because what happens is you're going to get it after. And that then reinforces that behavior to happen again. It's so much like what you said. If you will be consistent, you will feel good. You will have the mindset. You will see the reward. And just like you felt after you passed that exam. And that will hopefully lead to you being more consistent. But don't get it confused. Don't think I'm empowered, therefore I do, or, oh, I can't do today because I'm not empowered. No.
Right. Yeah, because you think about that, like how many, if you were to rate on a percentage basis, how much percentage of the time do you actually wake up and feel like doing what you need to do that day? I look at that, I'm like,
so little.
Like 6%, sometimes 1%, it's like, depending on how cool your month has been or whatever, but it's like, no, like you wake up and almost never feel like doing what you want to do or what you're supposed to do. You don't feel like it. And so, if you want to have a 1% or if you want to have a 7% life, then follow your feelings. But if you want to have an 80% life, then be consistent 80% of the time, and you'll get the most incredible lifestyle. And some people are like, well, why not 100? Why not 100%? Why not give 110%? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. There's no such thing as 100%, and it can't happen. And so, the 80% rule for me is a place where I can live, and I can exist, and I can be proud, and I can be accomplished, and what's funny is if you, like, I remember one year I did this goal and I still have it hanging on my wall over here, to make $1 million this year. And I put it online. I told everybody I was going to go make $1 million. And I operated basically at like probably 80%, just under 80, probably 75% that year. I had some of the most incredible successes of my life, and I didn't make $1 million. I made 2.1 that year. And so it wasn't like, it's like, no, the compounding effect of just 80% is all you got to do. Just being consistent 80% of your life will give you massive, massive returns. And so, and Grant Cardone says, you need to stack the wood pile so high that you have, too much wood to burn over the winter. You'll never burn it all. It's the same thing in your business, but the way to accomplish that is not through 110%, like everybody says. It's 80%.
Yes. That's incredible. And yes, because it's what people don't realize is how little we tend to perform, and we're not honest with ourselves. Right. I think, like, what's the real gut check here? At what level are you legitimately performing? And you want to tell yourself, realtors will say, I work all the time. But you give them like a Pomodoro test or something, you say, okay, let's fill it out fill out this thing. What are you doing every 15 minutes for a week? Set like
Right.
a tomato or an egg timer and go like,
Timer.
okay, let me,
Yeah.
yeah. And go like, what
Yep.
does it actually look like? Where is my time going? It's shocking. It's like taking a hard look at your credit card receipt. Where is that? Is it Starbucks, or I thought I was putting a lot of money in my 401k. I don't know what's happening,
Right.
and it's the reality of it, because I think we can be so delusional. But to your point, I was just listening last week in Cabo at an EXP event. I was listening to Michael Hellickson, number one agent in the world, I guess, multiple times over. Don't know the man. He'll be on the podcast soon, but he just said, you need the perfect daily schedule. He said, I'm not smarter than anyone. I'm not better than anyone. I'm not more handsome than anyone. He was like,
Right.
I was a common guy. But he said, I knew I could work real hard, and I kind of learned how to do that. And so he
Yes.
just went out
Yes.
there and he said, and everyone else was starting their day at 10, 11, 12. I started mine at 7:30 and I never stopped. Everyone else put out 3 open
Yes.
houses. I put out 50, and I made it the rule. And I never, ever would allow myself to put less. I'd show up an hour and a half early, and it was like, to put out all the signs and knock doors. And, it's like, he said, I'll tell you what to do, but most people won't do it. And even then he
Right.
was like, do you
Yes.
know, I could make many millions and work 20, 30 hours a week. He never really worked 40, 60, 80 hours a week. He actually just was so strict with himself for those hours. Like,
Yes.
he was pushing that 80%. I love it, because people want to go, wow, it's like 110%. That's impossible. You have 100,
Right.
but you don't have to operate
Yes.
at 100. You can still have a life, and still, I'm completely blown away by your 2.1 million. But I'm not surprised as well, because you were able to do that. So I want to ask you, you talk a lot about fear being one of the
Yeah.
biggest barriers to growth. What was a time in your own career when fear could have stopped you, was stopping you, and what did you have to change internally to keep moving forward?
No, that's a great question. I mean, fear is an interesting animal, right? Because it's different for everybody. Because when we face fear, we face everything. It's our traumas, it's our history. Where did we grow up? What messages were put into our mind? What was our perception of our abilities to accomplish things? And growing up, one thing that my mom did tell me, she wasn't very present in my life, but when she was present, it was these extreme highs and extreme lows. It was, I love you so much, you're my sweet boy, and I believe in you. And then the next moment it was, but I'm sorry, you'll never be able to read. It's like, you have a disability. That's what she used to tell me. You have a
Oh my
disability, and it
gosh.
was really just her excuse for not teaching me. It was her excuse as to why she
Sure.
was so absent in my life. And I was on the second half of the family, tree. I was the second half of those 8 children. And that first half got a lot of attention. They had a lot of growth opportunities and stuff. They still never went to school, but they had more attention and more opportunities for education, things like that. And that second half of kids, basically number 5, 6, 7, and 8, we were basically neglected. And so that those fears always come into my mind of, man, am I worthy of it? Like my dad confided in me one time. I said, Dad, how much did you make in a single, like, what was your biggest year, that you made as a contractor, hammering nails, doing drywall, remodeling houses, as you were raising 8 children, and a wife. He was raising a wife too, he's taking care of her as basically 9 children kind of thing. And he said, he said, son, my biggest year was probably about $35,000. And I was like, wow. And I was like, I remember that month thinking, wow, that's staggering. Like, I made that last month, and it was like, oh, like the thought process of what it took him to, push through that, be consistent as a father and as a provider. I know he had times where he had considered leaving my mom, and then he found out that she had a mental disorder. And he promised to her that he would be with her, and he would stay, through, sickness and health and hard times, good times. And so one of the things I learned from him, even though I look at it now, or I look at it in recent years and go, man, he should have divorced her years ago. Not really. Like, he fulfilled his highest level of integrity. I mean, he gave his absolute all to that process. And so what it really taught me was to be true to those around you, but also be true to yourself, to thine own self be true, that concept. But
Yes.
the word integrity has been convoluted, and it's been misused. It's been abused in our society. When people say, "Oh, I need integrity. I have to have integrity. I put integrity on my business card." I have a car dealership called Integrity Automotive. You have all these integrity plumbing. And it's like, show people, don't tell people.
Yeah.
Have a servant's heart.
Yes.
Have a desire to give to others, and then show them. Don't tell them what you're about. Show them what you're about. And then give them the opportunity to make the best decision for them and their family. And that's something I've done for years in my real estate career. Is I'm like, hey, I'm going to show you. I'll show you. I can tell you all this stuff, but I'll show you and I'll back it up. I'll give you a guarantee. If you don't like me, you can fire me, and nothing back to you. Nothing owed to you. And they go, really? Like, and it's like, yeah, like if you don't like me and we don't want to do business together, the money isn't that important to me. What's important is that you look back on this experience and you felt like it was a great experience, and that agent was more than just a licensed professional. It was a person on the other end who saw your scenario. He saw your, and one of my conditions I always tell my clients is I'll be candid with you 100% of the time. I'll always be candid. Always be honest.
Mm-hmm.
You
Be
have
honest,
to do the same
exactly.
for me. You have to give it back to me. And man, I've developed these incredible bonds and relationships with my clients and we just, I don't know a client, especially in recent years, because when I started in real estate, this was something I struggled with because my entire life was a lie. My entire life, I was trying to lie to people about my abilities and my education. When I would fill out a job application, I would lie on there, and I would say I went to this school somewhere up in the desert and these things, and all these things that I got really used to lying on because, I was used to them not wanting to hire me if I didn't have a diploma or I didn't have an education of some kind. And so I came from this, and we were trained to lie when we were growing up, so we'd be at home and the mailman would come deliver a package to the door, and we would open the door and he would see all these kids in the house where they should be at school, and he's like, hey, I remember when I was a kid, I had to have been 7 years old. And the mailman's like, hey guys, wow, you're all here. Crazy. Why aren't you in school? And we're like the only house he goes to where the kids are there, and
Exactly.
we're like, oh, we made up this lie. We were told, hey, just if anybody asks why you're not at school, tell them you're off track. And I still to this day, I don't even understand what off track means, like it's a thing. It was a thing in the school system where they had these tracks of time, I think, and sometimes the kids were out of school. So so coming from basically learning how to perpetually lie as a child through my adolescent years into my first jobs, stuff like that, to identifying that didn't help me in real estate. Some people are like, fake it till you make it. Man, I'm just like, be candid, honest, and upfront. Tell people you're new. Tell people you just started, you're fresh in the business and you're trying to build your family's future and a life for your kids, and people will resonate, especially wealthy people, and when I'm training these agents, I was training this agent here in Tampa. Oh, actually, I wasn't training her. She just asked me a question. She goes, hey, how do I get into luxury real estate? I want to do luxury so bad. And I'm like, you just then go do it. And she's like, but I don't know. My broker's telling me I have to do like 3 over $1 million homes, and then I can be a luxury and all this stuff. And I'm like, no, you don't have, no, go do it. Go talk to luxury people. Go talk to people. Go spend time in places where people exist that are, wealthy, and then just ask them for for their business. And she's like, oh, that's amazing. It's amazing.
She was waiting for permission.
She was waiting for permission. Yeah.
And
so now she just
validation
deems
and a
herself a
certification.
luxury agent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Phenomenal. I love that. It harkens back to something Krista Mayshore said, and I love following her. And she'll say, stop getting ready to get ready.
Yeah,
That's
right.
everyone's just getting ready to get ready, and it's like, no, launch it, do the thing, and she had an
Yes.
extremely difficult upbringing, abuse and being orphaned. And I mean, it's just absolutely, to this day struggles with worthiness at all, from a very basic level. Because yeah, she had that, break of trust, from, early on, with parenting. And yeah, she's learned every single day how to program her mind and remind herself to know and to think that she's worthy, because her default setting is that she's not. And she
Wow.
also has learned how to just trust her coaches and launch into it, and just try, just launch. She said, well, you're, getting ready to get ready, and you've got all these ideas and you've got all these stuff you want to do. Um, you know, I've already launched 8 ideas, and I'll be wrong on 6 of them, but I'll just pivot.
Yes.
And anyway, 2 of them will work out, and that's okay.
Yes.
So I
Some
absolutely
people say
love
like,
what you, yeah,
they say like ready, aim, fire, right? And I always
right.
say no, fire, then ready, then aim. Like fire. You'll refine your craft as you go along, but don't wait. Don't get
Yes.
everything ready. It's like when
Yes.
I train on prospecting. For with real estate agents, they're like, "What's the best way to prospect? Should I role play with these other agents?" And I said, "Look, role playing is a powerful tool, but the most powerful role play you can do is getting on the phone with live people and having conversations with them." And
Yeah.
they're like, "Wait, don't I need to practice?" No, don't practice. Don't practice. Go
Yeah.
get on the phone. Like that is your
Yeah.
practice. And if you're good at it,
Mhm.
if you
Yeah.
win that conversation, you get paid for it. So, I always tell people, don't get, don't, I can't even say it the right way. Don't ready, aim,
Don't get
fire.
ready to,
It's
yeah,
fire, ready,
exactly.
aim.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, because in the end, nothing replaces the actual real live moment and conversation. That's when the chips are down, and you'll find something, out of your big toe that's like, brilliant.
Yeah.
And because you need to make that paycheck, and you want to make money, and you realize that in this moment there's an opportunity, and you'll find that in the moment. I'm with you. I used to not, when I started my team, I used to not, I refused basically to do role play. I said, I will tell you what to say at your open house, and you're not shadowing anyone. You're doing your first open house, and you're doing it 2 days after you started, because I wanted to immediately throw them into the deep end.
Yes.
Was that sink or swim idea, because I knew that of course they're going to mess up some, and they're also going to have some success. And I needed them to see that life has both, and that sales has both. And to see that as soon as possible, to see the
Yeah.
risk
I
and
mean,
reward, and the
you
ups and
learn way
downs.
more from your failures, right? And I was
100%.
asking this, and I was doing a class yesterday on how to bring your traumas, or how to utilize, or how to leverage your traumas for for future growth type of thing. And
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
what do you like? Where do you learn the most? Do you learn the most from your successes or the most from your failures? And there's this new girl who's sitting over the side. She's an ISA for this team that I train here in Florida, and she's like, "Your success," and then all these like other agents that were seasoned veterans, they're all, "No, your failures." Like, they're like, "You learn way more from your L's, from your losses." And I'm like, "You do." And I referenced Maxwell's book, Failing Forward. And I said, just fail and fail and fail until you succeed. And it's the greatest gift to fail, because you learn so much from those failures, how you talk to people, how you respond, how you handle the situation. If you really effed up a conversation with a client, or you got mad at a client, hung up on them, or, all these little things that we do throughout our careers, and these scenarios that we have, um, through those failures are really where those successes come from.
I love that. So well said. So perfectly said. Well, I know that our time is getting short, and I have a couple questions and I'd love to hear what you think. When your work revolves around intensity, discipline, and
Mhm.
high performance, how do you keep your life grounded so that the success doesn't come at the cost of maybe your health, relationships, or peace of mind? And
Yes.
and I'd love to hear, how you, not how you balance that. I think it's an overused word. But how you maintain that. How does Alma take care of Alma?
Well, first, Alma has to take care of Alma first. I think we're self-sacrificial by nature. And if we're not taking care of ourselves and being the best version of ourselves, we can't be the best version for anyone else. And there's no such thing as balance. Balance does not exist. It's impossible. People are like, oh, I love this work life. I love that you like caveated that word because it doesn't exist, but we can have rhythm. We can have rhythm. And rhythm in life is what will give you the most amount of success, the most amount of satisfaction, the most amount of fulfillment, the most amount of, achieved goals and lived dreams. Rhythm. And so don't seek balance. You'll never find it. It'll never happen. You can't put the perfect effort into your relationship, into your business, into your kids, into your church, into your whatever. You can't do it. It doesn't happen. And so seeking rhythm through spending time with yourself first, identifying who you need to be for that day, be candid and open with yourself. I have conversations with myself in the mirror. Sometimes I'm alone and I'm like, okay, this is a very challenging moment. You know how to deal with this. You teach this, you train this. It's different when it's from us, right? When I was teaching that class yesterday on traumas, and there's been a few, how I grew up. I've had several, life-threatening instances in my life, including motorcycle accidents, car crashes, an airplane crash. There's a lot of, a lot of just like weird stuff that I, have like experienced in my life and has given me kind of a different outlook of and perception on what's possible or what people are capable of overcoming. And so utilize those losses as momentum, but don't seek balance. You'll never get balance. Just be okay with not being balanced and seek rhythm and seek peace. If you have peace in your life and in your mind and in your heart, you can have peace in your relationships and in your family and in your business.
Yeah. And I think, I know you're the first person I think that I've had on the show to say seek peace. But in fact, what a powerful word. Because if you can take all that you are, all that you've gone through, everything you're up to now, and just, get some inner peace and peace, like you say, in your relationships, it comes as like a space. This idea that, you can be calm about something, you can be okay with something, and that, you can be okay within yourself. I think that's incredible. You've coached and worked with people from all different backgrounds and personalities. What have those experiences taught you about human behavior, and how has that shaped the way that you lead, teach, and communicate today?
Great question. The way I grew up, it was a very narrow passage. So my view of life when I was growing up was very narrow. And it wasn't until I escaped that programmed thinking that I was able to see other people's perspectives. And I remember thinking, everybody, how do people say it? Everybody has a different story. My story is my story. And then they would say, my truth. It was the phrase, my truth. It's my truth. I have a truth. And I can remember just thinking like, no, the truth is the truth. Right. And the truth is there is a common like truth amongst all people. And I'm like, once I stepped away from that and I realized, oh no, people translate differently. Truth can't be the same for everybody because everybody translates differently. There's not a truth that we will ever find in this life. And so, and people are like, oh, you're misled. This is the truth, or my religion is right, or my method of thinking is correct. No, not really, because you don't have definitive answers on it either. Nobody does. We are one big mystery out here in the universe. And people, they justify their perception with faith, which I think is a beautiful thing. And I encourage people like, hey, whatever your belief system is, whatever it is, however you were raised, if you do believe it, double down on it and believe it even more and work harder at
Yeah.
being the best version of that person and that belief system that you possibly can. And then you'll have a natural reward for that. And so
Yeah.
it's like, I don't want you to believe like me, like believe like you, whoever you are, have your truth, because your truth is what's the most important. And so, and truths change, right? Like
So
I grew
good.
up fundamentalist religious,
Yes.
man, I 100% knew that it was right. Like I 110%. Heather,
Yes.
110%. I
Yes.
knew that this was right.
Yeah.
This was the path and this was
Yeah.
the way. And then, man, I have a completely different perspective on it now. And so,
I'm
but
sure.
whatever your truth is,
Yeah.
double down on it.
I love that. And look, the other thing that what you just said, and I got a lot out of that, was this idea that there is not just tolerance, but an understanding, a worldview understanding that different perspectives will and always naturally exist. And we're having issues with that in the world right now. Having an understanding that it's okay for other people to have different perspectives, different ideas. If I think back, as growing up in this country, I think it used to be more okay to have different perspectives, different ideas, different religions, different everything. And it while it still absolutely is, there is sort of this concept in perhaps mass media that is saying, okay, maybe we should be at odds over thinking differently. And I think naturally human beings know you are not going to think the same thing. There's a reason we call it like
Right.
sibling rivalry, and everybody has
Yeah.
their own unique perspective and experience of life. We are filtering it through this gray matter over our shoulders, and it can't be the same experience for anyone.
Right.
You and I are gonna watch the same sunset, and we're just gonna have a very different set of feelings around that, and a very different,
Absolutely.
recounting of that if you ask us later to tell the story. So
Yeah.
for obviously this is Women Who Rise, and although you aren't one, you have
I
coached
used to be.
many, you
My name's
inspired
Alma. It's a
them.
feminine name. I used to be a woman.
I
That's
love
the
it.
secret today. No.
Okay. That's perfect. Okay, there you go. There you go. Actually, my mother's best friend, no kidding, her best friend in life, and the maid of honor at her wedding is named Alma. Same spelling,
All right.
same
And it's a
pronunciation.
woman, right? Yeah.
Yes, yes,
That's
a
that's
beautiful
how
woman.
I
Yes.
it's only because of
uh,
this name that I'm on this podcast and I've been able to speak at the Women's Council of Realtors and I've been
I love it. Right. Yeah. No, but
Yeah.
and obviously we're joking, but basically for women listening who want to grow in their business and leadership, and because as a coach and you've been in a position to help and inspire and ride alongside many women, what do you believe is the biggest mindset shift that women or anyone really needs to make if they want to take control of their results instead of maybe waiting for the right moment? And if
Yes.
they're up to something big wherever their starting point is.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at all of the great women that I have around me, I raised 4 daughters. I've been through 2 marriages. I've had some amazing experiences. Um, and I've always had a love for women, and part of that probably came from my I definitely had mommy issues growing up and a disconnect, and so I always sought out feminine attention, and I never really understood why that was for me. I had a very, I would say a kind of atypical dad as far as from the masculine side. He's a construction worker and he hung out with guys and stuff like that, but one of the things that I saw dynamically that really messed up my parents is their roles. They didn't live their roles. And what I mean by that is you know, from a, you know, not from a patriarchal perspective, but from a perspective of we are in our best powers when we live our truest self. And so whatever that
Yeah.
truest self is, because here's the thing, like in relationships, right? You have masculine, you have feminine. Heterosexual and homosexual relationships usually have a masculine and a feminine. And when they live in their power and in their space, they have the highest level of success. But when you have 2 masculines or 2 feminines, you have a massive amount of conflict because there's no polarity in the relationship. And so if you can have polarity in all of your relationships, and you can have polarity in your business, and you can really own and dive into that strength that you have specifically from the perspective of a woman, and be the strongest version of feminine, you're going to have the highest level of success. I mean, you look at your Tina Call, your Krista Mayshore, there's a lot of people. I mean, I think of Tina Hare, who's on my
Veronica
team, Spring
Figueroa.
Benson. Yeah, all
Yes.
these amazing feminines that as soon as they realize, and they'll tell you this, as soon as they realize that their power was in the fact that they were a feminine and that they are not a man, is where they actually saw the highest levels of growth and their abilities to be incredible leaders. You know, you look at Spring, and this next week she's doing she's doing her spring what's it called? Spring break.
Spring break.
And I've been to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been to that multiple times. It's just an amazing event.
Yeah.
It brings everybody together. Everybody loves Spring. She's an amazing person. She's been a dear friend of mine for years. And
mine as
that
well.
whole that masculine versus feminine. So if you're a masculine, go be your masculine, be yourself and be your truest self. If you're feminine, go be the truest self of femininity and watch what happens. Like that is your superpower. The feminine is the superpower in this world. It really is. It's the mechanism that literally brings everything to pass. And, you know, I'm happy to be a man. I'm happy to be the masculine, but I'm not blind to the fact that the feminine is probably the most powerful of the two in that, you know, the mental, emotional aspect. Obviously not the physical, but the mental and emotional aspect.
Yeah. So good. I took so much from that. And, you know, like you said, I think there was, when I entered business in the 90s, there was this idea, like, kind of hide who you are as a female. I worked in a lot of male dominated industries in marketing and advertising, sales, everything. And, would try to, stand up taller and dress in, super crisp suits and do all the things so that I could sit at the boardroom table and have my questions be answered, or, have what I say be valued. And even then it was quite a struggle as a younger female. It was just sort of, discounted. And this idea now, and I think our world is so much more open to it now, which is that there's been this breaking of the glass ceiling. There's so much more acknowledgement and understanding. I mean, look at just Oprah, like the empire she built by just being such an open and conversational and, great and interesting and dynamic woman who was a listener, really, and was someone who used a platform to listen to others and to give people a chance to tell their truth or their story and nurture them in the end, and so I love that because I think that, and Spring, by the way, is making a name for herself right now with being able to say, let's embrace, if you're female, let's embrace like who you are, understand that your nurturing capacity, is a great thing. And we often talk about real estate as potentially the future being, even bigger for women in terms of opportunities. It's already such a great opportunity for, a mom, if you're trying to figure out how to have that rhythm between picking up the kids from school and, spending time with them or in their class, and then be able to bring home the bacon in a major way and afford an incredible vacation or something, and the time to do it. It's incredible as a flexible job like that. So I love everything that you said with regard to that. If you had to name the 3 non-negotiables that you have developed for long-term growth for yourself and others, not just financially, but just as a person in the world, what disciplines or principles would you say that no one can skip if they truly want to rise?
Number 1, your health. Take care of your health. Because if you're not healthy, you're not going to be happy and you're not going to have energy. For me, it's not about the physique, it's about the energy. And some people it is, it's great. But it's about the energy. It's about how can I perform today? What makes me feel good? And so take care of your health. Don't put toxic things into your body. I always ask people, hey, if it's not healthy, it's not food. And we have this translation of, hey, this is food. Well, is it healthy? Well, no. It's popsicles and pancakes, right? But it's like, yeah, pancakes it's like the most famous breakfast food in the world, but it's absolutely not a food. It's not healthy. You can't tell me a pancake is healthy. It's just not. So it's cake. It's cake that you eat at breakfast time. That's what it is. It's birthday
Right.
cake that you eat at breakfast time, right? It's the same elements as basically a birthday cake. And so it's like, it's not healthy. So don't put it in your body. And so that's
Yeah.
number one. Take care of your health, because your health equals your energy equals your outcome. And so I love that. The second thing is, look at who you really are as an individual and have absolute clarity of who you are. Seek that as quickly as possible. Figure out who you are as quickly as possible. Now, am I the same person now that I was 10 years ago? No. Am I the same person I was 20 years ago? Definitely not. Will I be the same person in 5 years that I am now? No. That's not what I'm saying. Don't define yourself for the next decade. Just define who you are currently, because what that
Yes.
does is it causes integrity to just naturally happen in your mind and in your heart and in your soul. And so find out who you are and really make it define, this is who I am. And that comes with two things. You have to identify what are your beliefs and what are your values. And guess what, guys? Your beliefs and your values are going to change throughout time. So if you have a different belief system, your values may change. If you create different values in your life, your beliefs might change. But figure out, what do you believe, and write it down. This is something I never did. And then one day I sat on a beach in Miami or in West Palm Beach one day, and I was sitting there and I was like, what do I believe? What do I value? I was taught all this stuff growing up, and I had this, religious upbringing, and I've had business coaches, and I've had all these amazing things, but what do I believe right now? And so I just wrote down a list of my beliefs, and then I wrote down a list of my values, and I couldn't believe how much I believed, and some of the stuff that I used to believe, I don't believe that anymore. And so identify who you are right now so you can be your most natural, organic, and authentic self. And then the last one, I'd say the third one would be, you have to determine how to have a servant's heart. And some people are like, well, what does that mean? What's a servant's heart? Well, you have to be able to serve people intentionally and authentically, because people are like, well, that's not really a recipe for sales. Actually, yes, it is. The best recipe for sales is the highest level of customer care and the customer service. I think about my buddy, Justin Udy, who's the number one agent for Century 21 right now. And, or he's one of them, like top 5, definitely, but he's been number one. They swap back and forth. But, he's a dear friend of mine, and we communicate often, and we've had just great conversations. He and I were in the same company together for well over probably almost 2 decades. And, Justin always says, you have to give world-class customer care. And he said, and that takes a heart of gold, and I translated it to be having a servant's heart, and being a servant of everyone around you, and then my friend Jimmy Rex, who was a huge Keller Williams producer for decades now. He's with, I don't know who he's with right now, but he talks about that, like being completely authentic, having a servant's heart, doing for others what they, maybe won't do for themselves or they don't feel worthy of. And so really being a caregiver and a servant of all those. And he created a company, a men's group. It's called We Are the They. And it was based around this scenario where he was dating this girl, and they were in a scenario where he got invited to go help a group of sex trafficking victims. And he was going to go serve and help on this team to go rescue some people. And she's like, yeah, it just seems really dangerous. And, I'm really worried. I'm concerned, you're going to be out of the country. You're going to do all this stuff. And she goes like, well, can't they just handle it? And he said, we are the they. We are the they. And I was like, and she's like, okay, I get it. We are the they. And so every time I pass a piece of trash on the ground, or I pass a door that needs to be opened for somebody, or, an elevator that needs to be held, or we are those people. We are the they. And only having a real, true, authentic servant's heart will produce that type of life. And the gifts you receive back are 100-fold. And I told Jimmy when he was on my podcast, Closer Cult, and I said, Jimmy, I feel so good when I serve people. Like, am I being selfish
Yes.
by feeling so good? And he goes, yeah, you're very selfish. He's like, in the best possible way. You're being extremely selfish, you know? And so because it
Yeah.
serves you and it serves them, so do it. Don't stop doing it.
Fantastic. Yes, and look, happiness can be comprised, the greatest happiness, and I think every parent really knows this, can be comprised of, the hardest work, but that or the simplest little thing, but that puts a
For
smile
sure.
on your own child's face, or that, makes somehow the world a better, safer place for other people in it. Because, I think there's some old Chinese proverb. It's like, if you want to be happy for a day, buy something, have a great meal or whatever. You want to be happy for like, a month, buy a car or something. And then if you want to be happy, for a lifetime, do something for someone else, contribute in some way. I absolutely love that. Well, and so much good stuff to unpack. Your three non-negotiables, I think, are incredible and can apply so much across any life, any job, any member of our audience. And you're
I would
giving
even add
so
a
much
fourth.
from your heart. Yes,
I would add a
let's hear
fourth.
it.
I would say that the truest way to happiness is through progress, growth, moving forward, because we tend to have like we'll have these principles of honesty, integrity, but if we're not progressing, we're depressed. If we're not growing, we're dying. If we're not contributing, we feel empty. And so make sure you're always using those principles of integrity and having a servant's heart and actually applying them into the process of growth and progress.
I love that so much. My husband and I often talk about never retiring because we all know, aunts and uncles and friends who, in fact, I once listened to a priest talk about obsolescence. This idea that or obsolescence, this idea that as become a senior, or whatever beyond that, as you enter, the last decades of your life, you realize that you are no longer a critical part of life, that you no longer have a place in society. And I mean, there's a whole episode we could do about that and how can we embrace, you know, what some cultures, figure are the wisest among them and used to be, in fact, revered and still are in some, certain cultures on earth. But, but this idea that, progress and growth gives you so much. And if you're standing still, you might be going backwards. You might be regressing in some way into a past version of yourself. It's not feeding you. It's not energizing you. It's not giving you those new rewards. And so, he and I often joke that we'll never retire. But the idea for us of ultimate retirement would be that we could choose, that we could literally choose how we want to show up in the world, and that we can get the finances in order in such a way that that is then become the ultimate choice, that we can go forward and decide and determine what that will be moment by moment. But we know that we never want to stop growing, because having achieved things in our life, milestones or helping others or mentoring, or I love mentoring others. It's just an incredible reward in itself. And you can fail like 80% of the time, but if 20% of the time you're doing something amazing, that gives you that feeling, boy, it's really worth it. So I have a
Yes.
last question for you. As you look ahead, what impact do you want your work to have on the people that you train and on the industry that you're part of? And what kind of legacy do you hope to leave when it comes to how people think about success, discipline, personal growth? Alma.
I want the people that know me to miss me, but I want them to feel like I served them in some way and made an impact in their life. And that's it.
Yes. Yeah. I feel that and I hear that so much from you in this moment. How profound. I just want to say that I honor you and I thank you so much for having this
Thank you.
time with us today, for sharing your brilliance, your wisdom, yourself, your nature and desire to graciously help others. And I know that your words today have made a profound difference for the people who have been fortunate enough to listen to this episode. And I just thank you. I appreciate
I
you
hope
so
so. Thank
much
you.
for being here. Yes,
My pleasure. Thank you
absolutely.
for having me on. I appreciate it.
You are so welcome. And thank you. Please listen in for our recap in a few moments. We'll be right back with you. Well, folks, that's it for today's podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on Women Who Rise, the success podcast for ambitious women. Today, Alma taught us number one of all things is consistency. He talked about the fact that many people try to lead with mindset, but in fact, if you are consistent, then your mindset will follow, because your mindset will understand that you're someone who shows up for yourself, that you're someone who does what you say, that you're someone who can and will, work hard every day, whatever that is. And you'll also win. You'll get the benefit of winning multiple times over. And that, in fact, will benefit your energy to then be consistent over and over and over again. Second, he talked about rhythm versus balance. He and I both agree having work-life balance is, in my opinion, kind of a myth. It's, how can you be balanced if you're growing a massive business, or if you're learning something new for the first time? Or, by the way, if you're on vacation with your kids, how can you have balance? So I think it's something that's very difficult to put in your mind as an achievement. But he talked about you can develop a rhythm. You can develop a rhythm in between your family and your self-care and your goals and your work demands and all of those things. You can determine something that allows you to pay the correct amount of attention to those things in turn. And your kids may know that weekends are all about them, or Monday night movies or whatever that is. And then they will, your work understands, and you can use your schedule to make sure that you're taking care of business when you need. The third thing he talked about was embracing your true self. He talked about all the people that he's coached in the last several decades, and the fact that knowing and understanding who you are and who you can be, especially as it applies to women, is that women can, in fact, be feminine in business. If you have a strong feminine side, you can embrace that business in your business as a superpower. So, in fact, we understand that if as a female, or if you have a feminine side that wants to, say, nurture and care for others, or be an inspiration, or whatever that is, be a guide or something, that you can in fact embrace and bring out those features and qualities of yourself, and use that as a superpower in all that you do. And then in fact it can be wildly successful to do so, because we talked about the fact that there is sort of a lack of this, or has historically been a lack of this in many other types of industries and businesses. So the caretaking aspect that you may find you are prone to doing can be great. And by the way, if that's not you, if you're more tactical, or you're more, I wouldn't say logic based, because I think we can all be logic based. But if you're finding that you have strengths in a different way, if it's being hyper structured or whatever that is, by the way, you can bring that out and know and use that as your superpower. So I think all of us have certain traits and strengths and things that we're cultivating or that we're using, and knowing that you can embrace whatever those things are, and just figure out how to pivot and use those on the fly in your business life. And then fourth, he talked about his non-negotiables. Health, he said, it's just absolutely number one. We all kind of joke that, or not joke, but if you're in a plane, they'll say, hey, you need to put your own mask on before you can put it on others or your kids or whatever. It's just simply the first thing. If you're neglecting your health, you're not able to be a contribution in the best way for other people around you. So figure out how to care for yourself. I can just tell you my always number one I'm going to talk about is sleep. Just figure that out. Figure out how to get good sleep. Figure out, research into it. I love the book Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. You can get that on Amazon or anywhere. I'll provide a link for you. But just literally look at caring for yourself. He also talked about, for him, health had a lot to do with if the food you're eating is not healthy, it is not food. So that's his, kind of his definition and his, rule of thumb when it comes to if he's being offered something that is not technically what any of us would associate as healthy, then it is not food. And therefore, why are you eating it? So I thought that was kind of a good way to look at that. Also, next, he said, be clear on who you are. And I talked a little bit about that as well. Get clear on it as soon as possible. He said, of course, you're going to evolve and change over your life. You're not going to be the same person 5 years from now or a year from now or 15 minutes from now. But the thing is, for now, get clear on who you are and just serve that person that you are. And then next, he talked about having a servant's heart. So being someone, one of his non-negotiables was be a servant. He says, figure out how to cultivate a servant's heart. Figure out how to be that way, because it's going to help every single aspect of your life, and the returns are multitudinal. And you can simply rest on that and know that, even if it's not apparent in the moment, but it is simply first of all, it contributes to the world around you. Secondly, it has all kinds of payback in terms of just making you feel good to be alive and to have done whatever serving that you've done. And then third, it's just good business. It just makes absolute sense. And then progress and growth. So that was his fourth one that he threw in there. And he said, always progress, always grow. That is one of the top secrets to life. I agree completely on that. I think is fantastic. Just talking about the fact that if you're not growing, you're stagnating. If you're not going forward, you're going backwards. And it doesn't mean that every single day, every second, you have to be somehow propelling some huge goal. It just means that you got to have something that's bringing you forward in life. So that's about it. Visit our website to find our episode guide and worksheet that will help you use these tips to take action in your own life. Please like and subscribe and join us everywhere podcasts are streamed. We can't wait to bring you more incredible content every week so that you can rise in your own lives and careers. Again, thank you so much. Heather Mansy, signing off.